which of the following perspectives makes more sense? The moderate Christian perspective or the atheist perspective? Okay, the Christian perspective accepts that there is a God and Christ is his son. Now you just beg the question that God doesn't exist, and then you say which makes more sense now, the perspective where God doesn't exist or the perspective where God does exist. Well, aren't we going to talk about the actual existence of God before we completely dismiss it and say that the atheist perspective is better, which is based solely on evidence and the fact that God doesn't exist? Okay, and that Christ is his son. Same thing. I will accept these two statements as absolute fact. However, I will disregard every tenet and tale of my religion that contradicts accepted reality or modern sensibility. Well, I won't disregard it, but I will say yes. Go ahead and interpret it. Use common sense to tell you whether something in the Bible is to be emulated or not. And not everything in the Bible is ultimately what we should be doing, what we should emulate. The Bible is full of stories of people who sin, of people who we should not emulate. Even King David, there are things he does which we should not emulate. He's held up as this great example of a man of faith, yet he does some horrible sins. So the tenets and tales that are contained in the Bible aren't meant necessarily to, God wrote, yes, but he didn't mean necessarily for us to follow and do exactly what everyone in the Bible did, because the Bible, it just tells how things happened. It tells you learn lessons from it. So no, don't disregard it, but don't accept it. Don't just do mindlessly do everything you see in the Bible. Same as don't disregard TV, but don't do everything you see on TV. The atheist perspective says, I will base my views of the world solely on evidence. Okay, I don't think this is an honest perspective, because I think everyone has to live by some degree of faith, and there are moments in life when faith is extremely important. I'm not necessarily talking about spiritual faith in God, but just faith that there's something around the next corner, or faith that you're going to land safely if you jump, or who knows what. You don't have any other options. That's the way life works. You don't always have sufficient evidence to live your life and to make complete conclusions. And I think this is something we do every day of our lives. And scientists can express this in probabilities nowadays, and they like to do that. But still, there's uncertainty, and everyone requires faith at some point in their lives. Not necessarily religious faith, but the person who bases their life and decisions solely on evidence can't take any action, or it's not possible. It's a good claim to make. It's a worthy goal, and I wholeheartedly support anyone who wants to live by as much by the evidence and the actual truth as they can during their life. But I don't think it's if you're honest, I don't think anyone really does that. What is the moderate Christian doing? His God is what atheists like to call the God of the gaps. No, the God of the gaps. I like the concept of the God of the gaps, and I'm a Christian now, because I see, you see the gaps shrinking and becoming small. I see the gaps becoming, one, larger, and two, more defined. I see the gaps, before it was like, God, he does everything. He causes the rising and the setting of the sun. He dictates the direction and strength of the wind. But now we know that those things have deeper causes, ultimate causes. However, what causes the wind? What causes the currents of the wind? There's yes, there's high pressure and low pressure, but there's also, how does that happen? The action of the sun, the Coriolis effect. There's mountains. There's the different rates of heating and cooling of water and land, and the depth of the water, and there's latitude. All these things play into effect, make wind blow. But where do all those causes come from? Well, they come from earlier. Go back, further back into history. You go back, formation of the universe. go back to the Big Bang. Okay, now what caused the Big Bang? You still have a huge gap there. What is the ultimate cause of the universe? And no matter how far you go back, there's always going to be a gap. But that's why I believe that the God of the gaps is actually a good thing and actually useful to Christianity, because I think there always will be gaps, and the gaps will become larger conceptually. Things that we once placed in the gaps before are going to be filled in with science and causes, but those causes ultimately be caused by something that we don't know, that's located in the God of the gaps. So the gaps actually become larger and more defined as we go through science. As we progress with science, as we create our ideas of how the universe acts and had formed. Most moderate Christians even support the theory of evolution. Okay, no original sin for him to... Okay, why is Christ getting nailed to the tree, to the cross, if there's no original sin for him to redeem? Now, this is a problem which I've somewhat covered in my original sin video. It's very short, though. I don't totally have the answer. I'm actually working on it, though, philosophically, and I may be able to post a video on my ideas on that. However, yes, it is symbolic, but not merely symbolic. I think the role of symbolism in mythology is much more than you give it credit, and I detect that you have quite a bit of respect, actually, for mythology and art. However, you seem to completely and totally discount the Bible as completely not valuable, when I think being the writer and poet that you are, I think that it should have a lot more to offer you. There you go. There's that. The Bible's the fundamentalist Christian says the Bible's infallible. The Bible's the infallible Word of God, and everything that appears to be a contradiction actually isn't. I guess I'd take that stance. If that's true, you get into divorce. Is it wrong for a woman to marry and then divorce? Now, in Luke, it's saying that it is adultery, that divorce is adultery. In Deuteronomy, it is saying that you are allowed to do it. I don't see a contradiction there. You are allowed to commit adultery. That's not a contradiction. There's no penalty, or there's no apparent penalty in this particular verse of the book of Deuteronomy for committing adultery, and there are other penalties in that book for other versions of adultery. But Jesus is not commenting. He's not changing that law. You still do the same thing about it. It's just now think of it as adultery. And is it wrong? It's always been wrong. It's always been the wrong thing to do. Breaking up has always been the wrong thing to do. But there is a provision for it, and there it is in Deuteronomy. That's what you do when it happens. Bad things do happen. Wrong things happen. You have to deal with them. So I don't see any contradiction there. So bring on some more if you like, but that's not one of them. Okay. How does a Christian who believes that the Bible is the unerring Word of God reconcile these two completely contradictory verses? Well, they're not contradictory. Okay, let's count the ways. They just ignore them. Normally I do. I don't think about it too often. Two, they claim mistranslation. I don't claim that for this, although there are instances where a contradiction might probably result from a mistranslation or a misunderstanding of the original intent of the author.